before I begin, I want to say that I'm not a certified doctor or a medical professional, so don't try anything without using your brain. Okay? I don't advocate getting injured. Okay, so they're invading our streets. They're running loose on our beaches and our mountain trails. They've even infiltrated America's fitness gyms. What are they? Toe shoes. The horror. You may have seen these on the internet, or you may have actually seen someone in your neighborhood wearing these very strange looking shoes. But why would anyone make such a fashion faux pas on purpose? Is there some other reason why these are becoming so popular? Well, turns out these toe shoes, more formally known as Vibrams, are part of a movement in the running community called minimalist running. So minimalist runners try to run either barefoot or with shoes that have minimal supports, and there's no arch supports, not much of a heel, and they're very flexible. They're more like a glove for your foot. They might also run in sandals or Converse, any type of shoe that's not your typical running shoe. And this movement has become more popular over the years. You might see people running around with toe shoes or just in sandals, or just not Nikes, not Adidas, not your Asics, but something very strange. And this movement started around in 2009 when a man named Christopher McDougall published a book called Born to Run. And in this book, he followed the story of the Tarahumara Native Americans. These Native Americans often run hundreds of miles wearing just plain sandals, and they have no problems, no injuries whatsoever. So Christopher McDougall, he learned from the Tarahumara, and he began running with sandals. And by following them, he actually overcame some of his running injuries and was very successful in his running career. And this inspired other runners to try ditching their normal shoes and running barefoot or with minimalist footwear. So is there other evidence that minimalist running is beneficial, or is it even safe? Well, if you ask a minimalist runner, they'll tell you, well, there's lots of countries out there where people don't even grow up with shoes. In these countries, underdeveloped countries, there's no Nike, no Adidas. Most people go around their daily lives wearing sandals or barefoot or very simple footwear. And a lot of famous runners do come from these areas. In fact, in the 1960 Olympics, an Ethiopian runner named Abibi Bikila won the marathon completely barefoot because he couldn't find a pair of comfortable shoes from his sponsor. And there are reports from the London Olympics that barefoot training is becoming more and more popular among athletes. So there are lots of anecdotes about how barefoot running is so cool and it helps alleviate your injuries. But is there any scientific support of barefoot running? Well, in 2010, these anecdotes inspired a team of Harvard researchers led by Daniel Lieberman to test out the effects of different styles of running with or without shoes. So they installed a force plate sensor in the ground and had a group of people run over it. And so they found that most Americans who wear big clunky shoes like these tend to land on the ground with each step with a heel strike. And when they measured the force of this heel strike, they found there's a big jolt that goes through the body and can potentially damage joints and muscles. And even though some people may wear shoes with cushions, this dampens some of the force but does not completely eliminate it. They tested these runners again, either barefoot or with minimalist footwear, and found that when running without a big cushiony heel, runners tended to land towards the front or middle of their foot. And this resulted in less force being put on their legs because the arc of the foot was engaged as a spring to absorb shock. They later filmed runners who had grown up without shoes and found that most of them developed the forefoot or midfoot strike, which makes sense because if you try running barefoot, it really hurts to land like this. But landing like this is much softer. They also say that most running shoes today are very rigid and they have arch support, so your foot muscles aren't doing much work. The shoe is doing it all for you. So this leads to deterioration of the foot muscles and a generally weak foot, and this also can result in flat feet, in joint pain, all sorts of bad things. In fact, in 2007, a study found that about 30% of runners are injured each year, and these may be the culprits. In fact, a year ago, I was part of that 30% of injured runners. I had very flat arcs, and it always hurt to run. I hated running. But then I read about barefoot running, and I decided to give it a try. So I looked up online and found some tips. Most sources say that you have to start out very slow, because the first time you take off your shoes to go for a run, it's like taking off a cast. Your foot has been cramped in a shoe like this for many, many years, and so your foot muscles are probably underdeveloped. So in the beginning, I started out very easily, just walking around my neighborhood barefoot, just a block at a time, 10 minutes a day. It wasn't easy at first. My arcs would still hurt, and it was always annoying to step on a rock or a twig. But over time, I built up the amount of distance that I spent walking barefoot. Soon I did several blocks, and then my whole neighborhood. My feet became stronger, my arcs were not so flat anymore, and little pebbles and rocks on the ground didn't bother me so much. Soon I began running a few blocks at a time. Then I was able to run around my whole neighborhood. A few months later, I was running 30-minute runs around TJ, no shoes, no problem. In the spring, I was doing hill sprints without shoes. And in the summer, I did a timed mile wearing just these, which I had gotten for my birthday, and they're very, very comfortable. By barefoot running, I've become much more aware of my surroundings as I walk around, so it's not a problem for me if there's a pile of glass in front of me, just go around it. And I've also trained myself to run with the forefoot strike instead of the heel strike, so I don't feel any more pain in my knees or ankles anymore after running. So I'm not a certified orthopedist or a running coach or a doctor, so I can't say that barefoot running or minimalist running is right for you. However, I am a believer in very, very careful self-experimentation. So if you are interested in trying out barefoot or minimalist running, there are lots of great resources out on the internet that you can find. All of them will tell you, though, to be very, very careful and start out slow. Because the first time you take off your shoes, you might think, wow, I feel so great, my feet are so light, I just want to run for miles and miles. But your feet aren't ready yet, because they've been stuck in these shoes for a long, long time. So start out slow and eventually build yourself up. And then maybe one day, we can go for a run together. I'll be very easy to find out in the area. Just look for someone wearing these birthday shoes or these birthday shoes. Thank you very much.
Alright, so I just want to start off saying that was one of the best researcher topic speeches that I have ever seen. I just want to start off by congratulating you. You had no notes, and that's extremely hard with a speech topic like researching and having to memorize specific names and statistics, right? You also used the space well. I noticed that you came out into the audience, and you also didn't use the podium. And you left that podium open for your props. And that brings me to my next point. Usually, when people make up their speeches, they only focus on one of the topics, like researching or visual aids. But in this speech, you incorporated visual aids as well, which I thought was very clever. And when you use those props, you just illustrated your point even further. You showed exactly what you wanted to demonstrate, and by having those two different shoes, the audience could really tell the differences when you were talking about it. Another thing is that you had specific names, like the minimal movement, I think, yeah? And that just shows how much time and research you put into the speech. And just one last thing, I really liked your conclusion. I thought that was really clever how you just tied up your whole speech, and you also tied it back to your title, and your title is supposed to reflect back to your whole speech, and I thought you did that very cleverly. Some things I would suggest would to just put down your props earlier. I know that you did put them down, but when you just put them down, then you can use your whole body more freely. Also, I know I do this too, but just hand gestures. If there isn't something really important to illustrate, then just put them down by your sides and just walk around. And my last suggestion is just for your personal story. I'm really big on personal stories, and I think that's a really important part of this speech. And I really liked how you tied it back to your speech and how it helped you. Something I would suggest is just to hook your audience earlier. So in the beginning, just try to maybe act out an example in your life, or maybe you were running and then all of a sudden you just fell or something, and you just realized that you wanted to try this new barefoot thing. So, but overall, I thought you did a really good job, and congratulations on your 7th speech. So please help me welcome up my